Hello, everyone. Someone asked me to reflect on this dichotomy of doing versus being, or being versus doing. And I thought that was interesting. It is a deep philosophical question, and I do welcome your comments below. Actually, I always am interested to know what you're thinking about these topics before I even share my thoughts. So you're welcome to pause the video if you like and tap a few notes in the comments below if you'd like to share anything before I share with you my thoughts here. Okay. So it's it's interesting, this question, because I, of course, have thought about it in the past, but then more like in the last 10 years, it feels to me like doing and being are increasingly one. Um, because in order to do something, the doing emanates from the being, right? If there was no being, there couldn't be any doing. And so to me, it's so connected that way. And in order, so the doing emanates from the being, okay? Because without existence, without being alive, for example, and just being alive, you can't do anything, right? That's one example. On the other hand, the being also emanates from the doing. What I mean by it is this. Um, in order to be alive, for example, just first talk about the human body and then we could talk about the soul. In order to even be alive, you need to do things. Well, you need to, for example, eat food. You need to, have shelter and get shelter. You need to breathe. It's the breath is particularly interesting for this question because when I think of being, right, if you were just to think about beingness as a human being and doing nothing, you could say, oh no, I'm just doing nothing. I'm just being right now. I'm doing nothing. What does that look like, feel like, be like? I'm still breathing. Even if I'm doing nothing, so-called doing nothing, I'm still breathing. My heart's still beating. I'm still aware of my thoughts, various thoughts coming in and out. So even awareness is an act. Now, maybe some of you are much more enlightened than me, and you think awareness is just being, and you're not actually doing anything when you're aware. Okay, fine. For me, though, noticing, being aware, being aware of thoughts, noticing them is an act of doing. Otherwise, what happens if we're not aware of our thoughts? Well, we tend to be controlled by them, right? Someone, for example, gets angry based on thinking about things that made them angry. And if they're not aware that they're becoming angry, if they're not doing the awareness of angry thoughts coming in, then they have no control over the angry thoughts consuming their beingness. Whatever, anger, sadness, frustration, lust, and even thoughts of positive thoughts of love, thoughts of joy, right? Like if you're not aware of those things, if you become aware of those things, you can do more of that. You can amplify your energy. You can channel your energy in that direction of, oh, a joyful thought came in. I just noticed that. Well, let me strengthen that even more. Let me use that frame of mind to see more joy. Oh, a loving thought came in for this person. Well, let me lean in. How else is this person lovable? How else might I love this person or myself, right? So I think that the two are so inextricably connected that it's hard for me to think of them as two different states. So I think of it more like conscious being and conscious doing. So it's so maybe this is what, you know, actually the person who suggested this topic. I would love to know what you mean by doing versus being. I should have said that in the beginning because I'm like, okay, I have these two words. I'm gonna see what I can do with these two words. But to me, the more interesting dichotomy isn't doing versus being. It's more conscious doing and being versus unconscious doing and being. Like that to me is more practical and something I can do something with, or something I can do to something I can use, which is a doing, to improve my being in my whole life, in every moment of life. Without practice, without conscious practice, our being, our nature of being, stays the same or even degrades over time. Now, so let me explain. When you were born, let's say you were born in a cave out in the wilderness and no human being was taking care of you, but you somehow survived. What might you become? Well, you certainly won't know language, right? And because no other human being has been taking care of you and talking with you and being with you. Um, and you probably would have some, um, I don't know, maybe you would be very peaceful. I wonder, right? You'd be very peaceful. You wouldn't have all the thoughts that come with language, and maybe you'd be really at one with nature. And yet, that's not how you were born. You were born in society. You took on language very quickly. And so, what now? And you took on the habits of society very quickly. Well, you had to as a child growing up. You were very influenceable. So you took on the thought patterns and the habits of the society around you. So now, if you weren't conscious about your being, you would continue taking on the habits and thought patterns of the people around you and the society around you. Now, there's that quote from Krishnamurti that says, "It is no measure of well being to be well adjusted in a sick society." It is no measure of well being to be well adjusted to a sick society. I don't know about you, but in my opinion, most of us live in societies that are quite detached from harmony with nature at the least, but also detached from harmony with the soul. And so if you are not consciously doing and consciously being, you are by default you're going to be living in alignment with what society's patterns naturally are, which, as I've just said, seems to be quite disconnected from soul and nature, because you probably live in a consumerist society like I do. Well, I mean, if you live in a modern city or modern town, you live in a consumerist society that cares much more about material being and pleasure, be pleasureful doing, than about, for example, the denial of the body. Now, I know embodiment is the cool thing these days, but the self-denial and asceticism go back way farther than the current embodiment teachings. Um, Both have value, obviously, but it's like the detachment from the soul is a worship of the five senses, right? The deep caring about the body and its pleasures, um, which masks which is so powerful of a sensation, right? These five senses are so powerful that it masks the still small voice of the soul oftentimes. And I'm not one to, punish myself, and I'm not an ascetic. But we live in a society that presumes there is no soul. It presumes that this body is all there is, this body mind is all there is, and you should do everything to make it comfortable and pleasurable. And so that's, in my opinion, the difference between conscious living and conscious doing and being, which is conscious living, versus just going about whatever society's patterns and your old conditioning has you go, which is unconscious being and unconscious doing. So conscious living is for you to return again and again and again every day and multiple times a day to a reality that is a truth that is beyond what how your parents raised you, perhaps, or how your society has raised you. You have studied things that are countercultural, right? That is aiming for a life and a world that is better than today, that would be better than whatever current society is leading towards. And whatever vision of truth and life and the world that you have that is unnatural, because if you just let society go as it is, it will go however it does. But you have a vision for something even better, something transcendent. And to hold on to that transcendent view, that transcendent worldview, takes work. You can't just be, because if you just be, unconsciously particularly, you will forget your transcendent worldview. You will go with whatever society is telling you, which sometimes is not bad, but there is a vision that is beyond what you typically, unless you live in some kind of monastery or spiritual community or eco-commune or something, there's a vision beyond whatever you're hearing from daily life, on social media, from people around you, right? From whatever you go out, and encounter society, beyond that. Beyond what most people you see are living. And the conscious doing and being is continually returning to that possibility and practicing again the possibility of the transcendent, or the possibility of the deepest possible, the deepest core values that you have. So doing and being, to me, are one. Conscious doing leads to conscious being. And conscious being, the practices of conscious being, because how can you be without practicing something and doing something? Even breathing, even stopping and pausing, right? Someone says, oh, I'm just being. No. You had to stop whatever you were doing, so-called, and just so-called be. Oh, I'm just sitting underneath a tree in meditation. Well, you had to go and walk to the tree and sit down in meditation pose, or whatever your pose is, and practice your breathing. That's still doing a lot of things. So conscious doing leads to conscious being. And the practices of conscious being, for me, that's been the energy reboot multiple times a day. The practices of conscious being naturally leads into conscious doing. Even when you're being unconscious, if you practice conscious being practices, it naturally leads to more mindful ways of doing, more loving and more spiritual ways of doing life. So those are my reflections. I really look forward to seeing if you want to expound on this dichotomy of being and doing in the comments below. I welcome it. And thank you for being here and doing life consciously.